imagine waking up one morning.
Yeah.
And you realize that like a decade of your life is just gone. Like completely gone.
Yeah.
But it wasn't because of some, weird accident or amnesia. It was actually taken from you, stolen.
Yeah.
Like piece by piece.
Right.
By somebody that you shouldn't have been able to trust.
Oh my God.
That's the horrible reality that Gisèle Pelicot had to face. And her story, which unfolded in a French courtroom.
I mean, this sent shockwaves like through the entire country and even beyond.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So today on this deep dive, we're going to go beyond just the headlines. We're going to unpack the facts of the case, of course.
Of course.
But also what it reveals about our society as a whole, our legal systems, and just our basic understanding of consent as a society.
And I think that's what's so disturbing about this case, is that it happened in what seemed like a completely normal, ordinary community.
Right.
51 men from this small village in the surrounding area were actually convicted.
Wow.
So these aren't, faceless criminals from some like dark underbelly of society.
Right. These are people that we know. These are firefighters, security guards.
Right.
There was a journalist involved, even a DJ.
Wow.
Just people you might pass on the street every single day.
Yeah. You would never even think twice.
Never.
And it really hits home that this could happen anywhere.
Absolutely.
To anyone. And to make it even more horrifying, the mastermind behind it all was Gisèle's own husband, Dominique.
Yeah, and that's the part that just, I think, gets under everybody's skin.
Yeah.
He drugged her with sleeping pills and sedatives for almost 10 years.
God.
See, he erased a decade of her life.
It's unimaginable just to think that that can even happen.
And he was manipulating her into the state where she couldn't consent to anything.
Wow.
So it wasn't just about controlling her in their marriage.
Right.
He was using that control to actually orchestrate the systematic rape of his wife by these other men.
It's just unbelievable.
And the worst part is that he filmed every single assault.
Oh, God.
So there's just this irrefutable evidence.
That's chilling.
It's awful.
So Dominique used a website called coco.fr to find these men.
Yeah, so coco.r was a platform for, I guess you could say casual encounters, sharing adult content. It wasn't designed for criminal activity at all.
Right.
But he used the anonymity and the reach of the site for his own scheme.
Wow. So he was really taking advantage of that.
Oh, yeah. He lured all these men in. And like I said, most of them lived within 50 kilometers of this village to participate in these assaults.
And then during the trial, their defense was that because Gisèle was unconscious, they didn't think that what they were doing was actually rape.
It's unbelievable.
I know. And one defendant I read went so far as to say that the trial was rushed and botched. Which, I mean, to me, that just adds another layer of, like, detachment from what was going on.
It's chilling.
Yeah, it really is.
And that's why I think this case is so important, because it really shows how some people view consent.
Right.
This idea that just because she wasn't physically fighting back, that they weren't violating her.
Right.
It's so dangerous.
Yeah, and it's such an outdated mindset.
Totally.
The prosecutor in the case said that unconsciousness cannot equal consent.
Right.
It just can't.
Right.
And that belongs in a bygone era. But obviously this case shows that type of thinking is still around.
It makes you wonder why, even in, this day and age, this kind of mentality is still so prevalent. It's not just a legal question. It's a societal question as well.
Absolutely. And I think it's ingrained in certain power structures and attitudes
that
have been allowed to just fester for far too long. And you look at the mayor of Mazan, the village where this happened. He initially downplayed the severity of what was going on. He said that at least nobody died.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
His reaction is almost like a microcosm of the larger problem, right? It's like it's easier to minimize, to deflect, to not look at the uncomfortable reality of what happened to Gisèle.
Yeah, absolutely. But his comments, they actually sparked a huge backlash.
I can imagine.
And he was forced to apologize and to withdraw from public life.
Which I think speaks to a growing awareness and rejection of these types of attitudes towards sexual violence.
I hope so.
But the fact that he said it at all shows how far we still have to go.
It's just a harsh reminder that victim blaming is still so prevalent.
Yeah.
And in this case, it goes hand in hand with this disturbing lack of understanding about what consent really means.
It's true.
Yeah.
And this is where you see how incredibly brave Gisèle Pelicot was. She could have just stayed silent and remained anonymous.
You would understand that.
Of course. But she didn't. She actually chose to give up that right.
Wow.
To anonymity and make her story public.
So she chose to face these people.
To face
her abusers.
Yes.
Wow.
To reclaim her narrative. and to kind of force a national reckoning with these really uncomfortable truths.
And I think her decision to actually speak out was such a pivotal moment in all of this.
It was.
Because it shifted the focus back to where it belonged.
Absolutely.
On the victim, on this horrific violation of her autonomy. She wasn't going to let shame define what she went through.
She really took back her power.
Yeah, and she had this incredibly powerful statement. She said, "I was sacrificed on the altar of vice."
Wow.
And that statement resonated far beyond just the courtroom.
Oh, yeah.
It became a rallying cry for women across France and around the world.
I can see that.
She refused to be just a victim.
Yeah.
She became this symbol of resistance against victim blaming and a champion for the right to bodily autonomy.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and her bravery sparked this firestorm.
Oh, yeah.
People took to the streets demanding justice, accountability,
Right.
and a change in how sexual violence is viewed and prosecuted. It became so much bigger than just this one case.
It did. It became like a catalyst for a much broader conversation.
Right, and that conversation even extended to legal arguments.
It did.
Campaigners energized by Gisèle's courage started pushing to explicitly incorporate the concept of consent into French rape laws.
Wow.
So that seems like a really fundamental change.
It is.
Can you kind of unpack that for me?
Yeah.
How would that work in practice?
Yeah.
What are the key differences that they're proposing?
So right now, the definition of rape in France is based on proving violence, coercion, threat, or surprise.
Okay.
And as we've seen in this case, that leaves a lot of room for interpretation.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The argument is that this definition is outdated, and it doesn't really do enough to protect victims. Especially in situations where, drugs or alcohol are involved.
Right, or unconsciousness.
Right. So these proposed reforms, they want to establish a clear understanding of what consent actually means.
Okay.
To shift the focus away from the victim's resistance to what the perpetrator was actually doing.
Okay.
And if they understood that the victim was willing.
That makes a lot of sense. I imagine, though, there's some pushback.
Oh, of course.
To these proposed changes. What are some of the counter-arguments that you saw in the sources?
Some legal experts say that proving a lack of consent beyond a reasonable doubt can be really difficult, especially when there's no physical evidence. Right.
Of force or coercion?
They're worried about, false accusations.
Yeah, and that it might be harder to get convictions.
Okay.
And then others are concerned that if you define consent too narrowly, that you might accidentally criminalize acts that actually fall into more of a gray area.
Yeah, this case really highlights those complexities.
It does.
Navigating consent, not just legally, but even socially.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
But even with all of those concerns, you can't deny the impact that this case had on the legal landscape.
I think you're right.
It shone a light on the need for some serious reforms.
Right.
To have laws that actually reflect a modern understanding of consent.
Right.
And give more protection to victims.
Right.
And whether or not these specific reforms are actually adopted, just the conversation that they started is essential.
Yeah.
Because it's forcing everyone to reevaluate this legal framework surrounding sexual assault.
Which has got to be a step in the right direction.
Absolutely.
And another thing that was a big point of contention was the sentencing disparity in this case. Right.
So Dominique Pelicot received 20 years.
Which was the max.
Right. But a lot of the men involved got much lighter sentences.
Yeah. And some people say that sends a really dangerous message.
Right. Because it kind of minimizes their role in these horrific acts.
Yeah. The sentencing disparity is really complex. Yeah. There are no easy answers.
Right.
And it's true. Some people see it as a sign that the justice system still doesn't really get it.
Right.
Doesn't understand how serious these crimes are.
Right.
That the sentences should be more in line with the trauma that Gisele went through.
Right.
But then others say, well, it's just a reflection of the existing legal framework.
Okay.
Which might not allow for harsher punishments when the victim was unconscious.
So it's a debate about whether the law needs to be changed.
Right.
Or the interpretation of the law.
Exactly.
Either way, it's clear that this case started a really important conversation about justice and accountability.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to remember that beyond just the legal debate,
right,
there's the actual human impact.
Of course.
The trauma that Gisele went through, it goes so much deeper than just the physical violation.
Of course.
The loss of memory, the betrayal by somebody she trusted.
Right.
The psychological scars that will probably last her entire life.
It's just heartbreaking.
Yeah. And those are all things that the legal system can only partially address.
And one of the sources said that she talked about feeling like a prisoner in her own home.
Yeah.
And that image is just so powerful and haunting.
It is. It speaks to this really profound violation that goes so much deeper than just the physical. It's about control, manipulation, and stealing somebody's sense of self, their agency.
And I think her story really highlights how important it is to provide comprehensive support for survivors.
It does.
That it's not just about legal justice. It's about dealing with the emotional and psychological wounds that run so deep.
Absolutely.
Reading through her account, I was so struck by her resilience.
I know, me too.
Despite everything, she still found the strength to fight back, to reclaim her voice, and to demand justice.
And she did.
Yeah.
It really is a testament to the strength of the human spirit.
And it makes you wonder about the men involved.
Yeah.
What made them participate in these horrific acts?
Right.
Was it just that they didn't understand consent? Or was there something even darker going on?
That's a question that I think hangs over this entire case.
Yeah.
These were seemingly ordinary people living normal lives.
Right.
And they became complicit in something truly horrifying.
It's scary.
It makes you think about, like, the darker parts of human nature.
Right.
What makes people cross those moral boundaries?
It's easy to just label them as monsters.
Oh, yeah.
But that's too simple.
It is.
That doesn't explain how seemingly normal people can be capable of doing these things.
Exactly.
So was it a lack of empathy?
Right.
A messed up sense of entitlement?
Yeah.
Were they influenced by societal norms that just kind of downplay how serious sexual assault is?
Those are questions that I think psychologists and sociologists are trying to figure out. It's about understanding how complicated human behavior is.
Right.
The interplay between personality, social influences, situational factors.
It's just unsettling.
It is.
Because it makes you realize that the potential for evil is there in all of us.
It is.
Given the right circumstances.
Big ceiling thought.
It is. And it brings us back to the role of technology in all of this.
Yes.
Dominique Pelicot used Coco.fr to recruit these men.
Right.
He was exploiting the anonymity and the easy access of the online world.
Exactly. And this case brings up some really important questions
How?
about the responsibility of these tech companies in preventing their platforms from being used for criminal activity.
Yeah.
I mean, Coco.fr was shut down.
Okay.
But it's just one example of how technology can be used for harm.
It's a reminder that the internet, for all of its benefits, it can also be this breeding ground for exploitation and abuse.
That's true.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to education and awareness, both online and offline. We need to be having these conversations, challenging harmful attitudes, and really promoting a culture of respect and consent. This case really highlights the challenges that we're facing as a society, right? We're grappling with these evolving ideas about consent. The victim blaming that's still so prevalent, and then the ethical dilemmas that keep popping up with all this new technology.
That's a lot to think about. And then there aren't any easy answers.
Right.
But I think the fact that we're actually having these conversations and challenging these old assumptions is a good sign.
Yeah.
The Gisèle Pelicot case, as horrific as it has really sparked awareness, debate, and hopefully real change.
Yeah, it's a stark reminder that we can't stay silent.
We can't.
We can't just turn away from these uncomfortable truths.
Absolutely.
We each have a responsibility to speak up.
We do.
To challenge harmful attitudes and to create a culture of respect and consent.
And to recognize that we all play a part in preventing sexual violence. It's not just about legal reforms or new laws.
Right.
It's about changing the social norms and the power dynamics that allow these crimes to happen in the first place.
So where do we go from here? What are some actual steps that we can take to create a world where cases like this don't happen anymore?
I think education is key.
Yeah.
We need to be open and honest about consent, healthy relationships, respecting boundaries.
Right.
And these conversations need to start early with young people.
Right.
We need to give them the knowledge and the skills to navigate these difficult social situations.
Yeah.
And to be able to recognize and challenge bad behaviors.
We need to shift the mindset.
We do.
From no means no to yes means yes.
Absolutely.
So that consent is enthusiastic, freely given, and can be taken aback at any time.
It needs to be an active and ongoing conversation between partners.
Yeah, and we also have to create spaces where victims feel safe coming forward.
Safe and supported.
Yeah, so that means building a culture where people are believed, where they're supported, and where they can get the help they need to heal, and to move forward.
And where they can access resources.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this case also shows how important it is to hold perpetrators accountable.
Yes.
No matter who they are or how powerful they are.
Absolutely.
Justice needs to be served.
It does.
Not just for the victim, but to send a clear message.
A deterrent.
Yeah, that sexual violence will not be tolerated.
Right. And that accountability should extend to the platforms and technologies that are being used to help these crimes happen.
Yeah.
I mean, tech companies, they have a responsibility to keep people safe.
Right, to put in safeguards, to be proactive.
Absolutely.
So it's a complex problem.
It is.
That needs a multifaceted approach.
We need to educate, raise awareness, reform laws.
Yeah.
And work together to build a culture of respect and safety.
And it's an ongoing conversation.
It is.
We can't let it fade away.
We can't.
We need to keep pushing for change.
Yeah.
Keep challenging the way things are, and keep believing that things can get better.
I think Gisèle Pelicot's story shows us the human cost of doing nothing.
It's a tragic story.
It is, but her courage, her resilience, her refusal to be silenced,
Right.
Those give us hope.
Right.
She showed us that change is possible, that one person's voice can make a difference.
Her story is a call to action for every single one of us.
It is.
It reminds us that we all have the power to create a world where consent is more than just a word.
Yeah.
Where it's a reality.
Where sexual violence is prevented.
That's a powerful way to wrap things up. It's a call to awareness, a call to action, and a reminder that we have a shared responsibility to create a better future.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you learned something today and that you're ready to be part of the solution.